We want to start before we get to the business, just on an update on what you're seeing, what life is like now that this war is in its fifth year. What can you tell us?
Okay, it's almost normal war during the war. Okay, we adopted a lot. Okay, so I can give you only one example. So during the December, February, 30% of time, our network was on the alternative sources of energy like batteries and generators.
Wow.
But at the same time, network was fully operational across the country. So this is, from my perspective, a good reflection of where we are.
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
How do you do that, though? How do you, are you constantly repairing and fixing things, or how do you keep things operational?
Situation is relatively stable across the territories under Ukrainian control. Mm-hmm. Okay, the only one threat is a Shaheds, drones, or missile threats that are not so fundamental for the so well distributed infrastructure like telco operator. Of course, we are suffering a lot in the areas that are close to the front line, and we are doing our best in order to restore and recover as soon as possible. And this is very much because of the heroism of our people and preparation and actually certain experience that we were able to gain during these 4 years in a war. We are doing a lot in order to strengthen our resilience. We did a lot of investments into the redundancy. We did a lot of investments, almost 100 million, into the energy resilience. So from our 16,000 sites right now, we can run almost 6,000 sites on the generators, and this number is increasing. On the batteries, we can run network literally for up to 10 hours without energy at all.
Oleksandr, I mean, it's. I don't want it to sound crass how I'm asking this, because it's a business question, but that's kind of how you've presented the challenge here. When you run a network in a way that has to be resilient during wartime, and you talk about using generators or other sources of backup power, that costs a lot more money and hits the bottom line in a different way than if you didn't have to rely on those resiliency measures. How much more is it costing you?
Actually, we see a certain decline of our marginalities in the beginning of the war.
Okay.
But this is from the position that Kyivstar used to be the best by marginality telco across the globe. With a record high 67% EBITDA margin, we are right now at the level of 56% EBITDA margin. The biggest challenge for us is how to, let's say, combine this resilience, necessity to be extremely focused on our daily operations with the development. And this is, I think, what we are doing in a really well, I will say, very well organized and a good format, being able to achieve a quite significant diversification of our business from a pure telco in a mobile and fixed market leader in a mobile and fixed business to the digital service provider with a telco license. We finished this year with almost 16% digital revenue that is partially related to the telco, but produced by the services like digital health, entertainment, ride-hailing, big data.
Well, on the cost side, does the new war in Iran and the higher energy prices associated with that hit margins in this current quarter?
To some extent, we adopted since the beginning of the war. The Ukrainian market was characterized by a relatively low energy prices before the war. Okay, but because of the shortage, because of the destroyment of the production facilities by the Russians, and necessity to import energy from the neighboring countries, right now, Ukrainian business is working on the Eastern European and sometimes even Western European tariffs. Okay, and from this perspective, I think that we are quite okay. Okay, we adopted this growing cost. Okay, and we are doing some proactive steps how to hedge this cost in the future. Maybe you saw, but we did our first small investments into the solar power plant. And this is the way how we can increase resilience and redundancy of the energy supply. But from another perspective, this is the way how we can hedge electricity cost on the consolidation level of the Kyivstar group.
Oleksandr, that was one of the things I was curious about. Like you mentioned, you're combining resilience with development, and how much you can do of just keeping the company running day to day and your employees safe and meeting what your customers need amid a war, versus thinking about strategy longer term and how you want to, commit funds, CapEx, what have you, to build out the business longer term. It sounds like you're able to do that.
Yes. The reality company is performing quite good. We have support of the shareholders, and I can give you probably the best example how we see the combination of the, let's say, growing resilience and redundancy with the development. We were, and we are actually the first European operator to launch direct-to-cell services provided by Starlink. Okay, so we see this as the development because we believe that actually the future is in cooperation between terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks.
Right.
That's why we are doing this proactive step. But at the same time, we provide this service to our customers for free, taking into account the current circumstances and major fundamental humanitarian need to stay online, okay, within very difficult circumstances, sometimes circumstances that are dangerous to your life.
Yeah. Hey, one of the things I'm curious about when you say Starlink, do you think at some point, like that is what kind of replaces some of the traditional telecom mobile service companies? Is that kind of where things are going?
I don't think so. I think that the future in cooperation rather than competition. Okay, every country is quite unique. It's a difficult regulatory framework, and somehow satellite networks have a fundamental disadvantage. Okay, this fundamental disadvantage is open sky, necessity to have open sky when you are using satellite services. So moreover, it's a major issue with capacity, and it will be extremely difficult to service high-density cities like Kyiv, New York, London with satellite technologies if the number of customers will increase. But at the same time, we see a number of fundamental use cases where we can use satellite technology in order to expand our geographical coverage, to optimize our investments into the geographical coverage, to ensure emergency communication for every customer, okay, independent from the terrestrial network that is actually under daily attacks from the Russian side.
So in other words, that technology can supplement traditional terrestrial cellular technology, but because it doesn't necessarily have the same coverage indoors or in homes, it won't replace it in your view ever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I think so.
So, Oleksandr, I'm curious about the Ukrainian customer right now and how spending has shifted in recent years as this economy has entered a wartime economy, as different members of the economy have gone off to fight, come back from fighting, gone off to fight again, and that sort of thing. What does your customer base look like specifically in Ukraine right now?
The biggest issue is demographic crisis and migration crisis that we are facing in Ukraine. So we have right now, according to different sources, around 32 million Ukrainians in Ukraine. Okay, and unfortunately, it is slowly decreasing because of the war, because of the migration. As an example, we have on a monthly basis around 2 million customers being serviced abroad. These are Ukrainian migrants out who are still connected to the Ukraine through Kyivstar services with their relatives, with their services in Ukraine, with their state-provided services, banking services in Ukraine. Okay, so somehow it's a quite, I would say, difficult situation as a result of the constant air attacks, shelling. Okay, we see the growing number of double SIMers in the country, and every blackout is actually driving people to buy extra SIM card in order to stay online and to ensure a certain redundancy from the potential problems. Okay, so somehow it's quite specific market that might be normalized after the war. We expect that, share of the Ukrainian migrants will be back. Okay, and this will be a huge economic, I will say, trigger for the future recovery.
Hey, one thing we wanted to ask you, just have about a minute or so left here, Oleksandr, is that our understanding is you also serve customers in Ukraine, of course, as we've been talking about, but also the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Is that right? And if so, what can you tell us about what's going on there and what exposure you and your company and really your employees have?
As a Kyivstar group, we have a very, very, very small exposure as we have a very small office in Dubai. Okay, so this is very much driven by substance, and we have just few employees there that are helping us with investment relationship, corporate affairs, and reporting. Okay, so of course, people's safety is our number one priority. Everyone is in a remote mode. Okay, but somehow we are partially affected even without operations overseas. So all our operations is concentrated in Ukraine, and we have ride-hailing business in Uzbekistan.